In this lesson, we're going to set up some image planes that will really help us while modeling our bike throughout this course. It's really important that we have some sort of reference inside of our 3D space so we actually know what we're going to model and how we can keep it proportionate and any design aspects that are in the concept drawings. It's just like whenever you're trying to draw hands, when you first start out, you don't exactly know the specific details of the hands, but you can use a reference to find out and learn. So it's kind of the same way in 3D geometry. We may be working with objects that we've never worked with before. Let's say if it's a new character, a new design of a character, we need to know how to model that out. So we like to set up these reference image planes to help us. Now the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go to my front view and I'm going to create a plane in my front view. So this is under the Create panel, Geometry, Standard Primitives, and here we can find our plane. And I'm just going to drag one of these in our scene here. I'm not worried about the size or the proportions just yet. And what we're going to do first is actually get rid of these segments in this plane. And we really do not want these segments in here because it could be interfering with our reference image plane. Simply because we're going to be working with edge faces turned on, and these can be kind of distracting whenever we're trying to model. So what I like to do is go to the Modify panel and take my length and width segments down to 1 by 1. And now you'll see that those segments are now gone and we're free from obstruction. Now the next thing that I want to do is go ahead and resize this image plane. So we're going to go to Length and we're going to type in the dimensions of our image, simply because we want to make sure that our proportions are correct for our reference image as well as our model. So let's go ahead and type this in. Our length is going to be 480 and our width is going to be 640. So our image was 640 by 480. Now you'll see that this image is quite large, okay, or the image is going to be quite large, and I want to kind of take that down a little bit. I don't need it to be this large. Now there's nothing wrong with modeling from a plane that is this large. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's just my personal preference. So what I'm going to do is actually divide these numbers by 4 and just type in those length, or that length and that width that way. So I'm going to type in 120 for my length and 160 for my width. So now my image plane is smaller and it's still proportioned properly. Alright, so now we're ready to go ahead and apply our image to this reference plane. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to go to our material editor and we're going to just drag in a standard material. So I'm just going to drag this into my view 1 here, and you'll see that we have a standard material that has been dropped in, and we're going to double click on diffuse color right here. Now this will bring up our menu for our material here, and we want to go ahead and apply a bitmap to this material. So I'm going to scroll down until I see my maps roll out, and I'm going to expand that. And here you'll see diffuse color. And what I'm going to do is apply a map to this diffuse color channel. So I'm going to hit None, and I'm going to choose bitmap. Now we want to use bitmap because we have an image saved on our computer. So if I double click on bitmap, here we can see our side image for our reference image. Now you can find this image underneath the project files folder, in the scene assets folder, and the images folder, so much like this right here. So we're going to go ahead and hit open on this, and it has applied itself to this material. So now we need to go ahead and apply this material to this image plane here. And what we'll do is, with this plane selected, we're going to go ahead and hit this Assign Material to Selection. Now you'll notice that in our scene, let me just kind of minimize this here a little bit. You'll notice that in our scene it has turned gray. The reason that is because we also need to hit this Show Shaded Material in Viewport. So once we do that, now you can see that image inside of your perspective view. Now if you can't see that in your perspective view, let me go ahead and close this material really quick. If you can't see that in your perspective view, that you might want to check your shading settings here. Let's say this is set to realistic. it might be set to wireframe. So if it looks like this, that's the reason why. You want to set this to realistic or shaded. I'm just going to go ahead and go with shaded. I don't need that realistic lighting on here just yet. Now, we're not going to be modeling inside of our perspective. We're going to be modeling inside of our front viewport. So what we want to do is activate that viewport just by clicking in there anywhere. And we're going to switch this over to shaded. So now we can see this image plane in here. Now, if the grid is getting in the way, if you find it too distracting, you can hit G on the keyboard, and that will turn that grid off. Now, I'm also going to go ahead and maximize this viewport just so we can see this a little bit easier. Now, one more important thing that we must do to these image planes before we start is to go ahead and freeze them because we don't want these to be moving around. Now, let's go ahead and select this plane, and we're going to right-click on it, and we're going to go to Object Properties. We do not want to go ahead and do freeze selection just yet. If we do that, everything's going to turn gray. So let's go ahead and right-click and unfreeze all, and you'll get back to where you were before. Let's go ahead and right-click and go to Object Properties. So in here we can see that we have hide and we have freeze. We can go ahead and check freeze, and it will go ahead and turn that image plane gray again. So what we need to do is actually uncheck this show frozen in gray, and this will allow us to freeze anything while keeping it from turning gray. So let's hit OK, and now this image plane is completely frozen and we will not move it around while modeling. Alright, so what we've done is we've set up our reference image plane, so now we're ready to go ahead and jump into our next lesson where we'll draw out the frame of our bike.